teaching learning session of BECC 132 Principles of Microeconomics 2. In today's session, we will discuss about Unit 10, Block 4, Theories of International Trade. International trade theories are mainly three. One is mercantilism theory, next is theory of absolute advantage, and theory of comparative advantage. These are the theories of international trade. But further, we can classify these theories of international trade in so many parts, like classical theories of international trade, new classical theories of international trade, and modern theory of international trade. First of all, we must have to know about what is the meaning of international trade and why we have to study about these theories and who propounded various types of international trade theories. So, international trade means that if we are doing exports and imports with rest of the world, or we are selling our goods or our products to abroad and buying products from abroad, that is called international trade. At present, we know that all the economies are open economies. All economies have relationship with rest of the world. All countries are engaged in international trade. And international trade gave so many benefits to the different nations who are engaged in international trade. So, international trade theories explain that why different countries engaged in this process of international trade and what are the advantages they take from international trade. So let us start from first topic, theories of international trade. And theories of international trade means that first of all here learning objective. What are the learning objective of studying about these theories of international trade? These theories tells us that what are the traditional arguments of how and why international trade improves the welfare of the countries. To review the history and compare the implications of trade theory from the original work of Adam Smith. Adam Smith is known as father of economics, who gave the first definition of economics in 1776 in his book the theory of an inquiry into the theory of wealth of nation, and to the contemporary theories of Michael Porter to examine the criticism of classical trade theory and examine alternative viewpoints of which business and economic forces determine trade patterns between the countries. These are the learning objectives of this international trade theories. Now, this is the meaning of international trade. What is international trade? Exchange of raw material, finished goods, or manufactured goods across national border is known as international trade. In other words, we can say that exports and imports of goods and services with rest of the world is called international trade. In international trade, there are two types of theories. One is classical international trade theories, and second is new trade theories, that is known as modern trade theories. First is classical trade theories. In this theory, explain national economic condition, country advantages that enables such exchange to happen. It means classical trade theories was mainly propounded by Adam Smith David Ricardo, but the modern trade theory was explained by Hector Ugly. So classical trade theories mainly explain national economic conditions, country advantages which country get through international trade, which enables such exchange or transactions to happen. And new trade theories explain the link among natural country advantages, government action, and industry's characteristics that enable such exchange to happen. So these are two theories of international trade. One is classical and other is new trade theories. Now next is international trade theory. What is the meaning of this? Here producers based in advanced countries where labor costs are lower than the United States might now be able to export to the US. We know that natural resources, human resources, and capital resources not equally available in each and every country. In some countries, capital are more than labor, like USA, Britain, some advanced or developed countries, they always have more capital power but less labor. On the other hand, in developing countries or less developed countries, they have more labor but less capital. Same as in some countries, there are some natural resources, they are abundant natural resources or God gifted resources. Like African continent is rich of natural resources. But some other countries are less of these resources or less power of these resources. Same as in some countries, technical advancement is more. On the other hand, other countries have less technically advancement or they are technically backward. So, in these cases, countries engaged in this international trade, and with the help of this international trade, they get advantages. Those resources which have lack in those countries, they can buy or they can import that product from other nations. For example, in Japan, there is more technical advancement products, but they don't have natural resources. They have more capital intensive technologies. They have more technological advancement. So they can export their technical advanced products to the technically backward countries. And they can import natural resources from those nations who are rich of natural resources. So international trade basically based on the resources which you have abundant, you can produce those goods in large quantity because resources are available. According to the availability of the resources, each and every country decide to produce what type of commodity they want to produce. It depends upon availability of resources. If human resources are abundant, then we will produce more labor intensive products in which labor is used more but capital is used less. In USA, where capital is abundant, they will produce more capital intensive products and they can export capital intensive products to those nations who have less capital availability. So, producers based in advanced countries where labor costs are lower than the United States might now be able to export to the US. If cost pressures become intense, developing countries begin to acquire a production advantage over advanced countries. The United States switches from being an exporter of the product to an importer of the product as production becomes more concentrated in lower cost foreign locations. Basically, international trade depends upon specialization and the cost of production of the factors. If cost of production is less and we can produce more goods, then we will produce and we will specialize in that commodity, and by exporting those products we can get advantages from international trade. But if there is any scarcity of any resources in our country, then the cost of production will be higher. In that case, we will import those goods from the other nations. So, in this way, by this international trade, we can get advantages from doing exports and imports. Next is why we study this trade theory. This trade theory tells us about the benefit of international trade. We know that each producers want to gain maximum profit. The main goal of the producer is to maximize his profit and minimize the cost of production. So this trade theory talks about benefit of international trade. These theories show why countries should trade for products or services even when they can produce them domestically. It talk about pattern of international trade, what type of pattern we are using while doing this international trade. This theory show why countries specialize the way they do. It depends upon factor endowment. This factor endowment theory was introduced by Haxter Ohlin, which is known as modern theory of international trade. And this international trade theory talk about the role of intervention. This role of intervention means the government role. The role of government policy like tariffs means import restrictions or import tax and quotas, etc. These are called restrictions which is imposed by the government policies. So if government impose more taxes on imports and if government restrict the quantity of the imported product, then imports will decrease. And if government support for exporting products, if government wants to encourage exports, then government will provide concessions and rebates and foreign financial assistance to the exporters, so that encourage we can encourage exports and discourage imports by imposing tariffs and quotas. So government intervention also play very important role to restrict this international trade, to restrict the imports and encourage the exports. So trade theory is very important and it play very important role in present world. Next is types of international trade theories. How many types of international trade theories exist, and these what these trade theories tells us about this international trade. First is interventionist theories. In this theory, we will study about mercantilism. Next is free trade theories. Free trade theories in which there is no restriction imposed by the government. If government intervention is less and government is promoting free trade, government is following free trade policy, then absolute advantage and comparative advantage theory we will study. Next is trade pattern theories. Trade pattern theories depends upon the country's size, factor endowment, and country similarity theory. In this theory of country size, factor proportions theory, and country similarity theory explain these trade pattern theories. Next is trade dynamic theories. We know that at present whole world is dynamic. Each and every situation is dynamic. Nothing is static in this world. So trade dynamic theory tells us about product life cycle theory and diamond of national advantage theory. And we will explain all these theories in detail. International trade theory mainly tells us it explains the international trade. It justifies why a company does international trade. Here, two types of theories are mentioned here. One is classical theory of international trade, and second is modern theory of international trade. So, classical theory of international trade, in this we include mercantilism theory, absolute advantage theory, classic comparative advantage theory, Hexter-Ohlin theory, and Leontief paradox. And in modern theory, country similarity theory, product life cycle theory, global strategic rivalry theory, and Porter's national competitive advantage theory. So these international trade theories can be broadly classified into two parts. One is classical and other is modern. Now, what is mercantilism theory? Mercantilism states that countries should grow its reserves of gold and silver by encouraging exports and discouraging imports. Because exports, if we encourage exports, then foreign currency will inflow in our country, inflow of foreign exchange will increase and outflow of foreign currency will decrease. If inflow increases, that will give benefit to the country. So, mercantilism theory states that the country should grow its gold and silver reserves to encourage by encouraging exports and discouraging imports. Absolute advantage theory mainly focuses on the concept that country should produce an item that it can manufacture more efficiently than other countries. Or in other words, we can say that if one country is able to produce one product in a more quantity than other, then that country will produce more, and by exporting that product, that country can import that product which is available in less quantity. So, absolute advantage mainly focuses on the concept that countries should produce an item or any product which it can manufacture more proficiently than other countries. And comparative advantage theory says that business can take place even one nation can produce both the products in a larger quantity. If we are taking 2 into 2 into 2 model, what is 2 into 2 into 2 into 2 model? If we are taking only two countries, two products, and two factors of production. So this is known as 2 into 2 into 2 model of international trade. Here we are taking only two products, for example, wheat and rice. If we are taking only two countries in which the international trade held between only two countries like India and USA, and if we are taking only two factors of production like labor and capital, that is called this model. And if one country is able to produce both the products in a larger quantity than the other, in this case international trade will happen and it will give advantages to both the countries. Hexter-Ohlin theory maintained that companies should focus on producing items that uses factors of production available in abundant in that country. Hexter-Ohlin theory basically tells us about the factor endowment. It depends upon that what type of factor we have more. If in our country labor is abundant, then we will produce more labor intensive product, and by exporting these products we can get advantages from international trade. And if USA can produce more capital intensive product, then USA will produce more capital intensive products, and by exporting these products to the other nations, USA can get advantages from international trade. So Hexter-Ohlin theory mainly based on factor endowment or availability of factors abundancy. And Leontief paradox is based on the observation that US was importing more of capital intensive goods and was exporting more of labor intensive items. Paradox. Paradox means against. We know that USA is capital abundant country and India is labor abundant country. But if we are doing inverse of this situation, it means if USA is importing more of capital intensive product and exporting more of labor intensive product, that is known as Leontief paradox. Here is a contradiction that when USA can produce more capital intensive product, then why USA is importing more capital intensive product and why USA is exporting more labor intensive product? This explained by Leontief. That's why it is known as Leontief paradox. Next is modern theories. In modern theory, first is country similarity theory. This states that people in countries that are in the same level of development have similar preferences. If the development level of the countries are same, then they can follow this international trade theory by using the same pattern of trade. So country similarity theory states that people in countries they have same level of development and similar preferences. Next is product life cycle theory. It tells us about there are three stages in product life cycle. One is initially, first of all, new product launch. After that, maturing product. And next is standardized product. So these are three stages of any product life cycle. First is new product, second is maturing product, and third is standardized product. According to this theory, we can export and import goods and services by following this life cycle of the product. Next is global strategic rivalry theory. This focuses on how companies can get competitive advantage when competing against global firms in same industry. Next is Porter's national competitive advantage theory. This theory was developed by Porter and it tells us about the competitive business segment depends on innovative items, processes, etc. If a country innovate technologies and innovate more resources, then country can get more competitive advantages by the engagement of this international trade. So this is in brief what is the international trade meaning and what tells us about these international trade theories and how we can classify these international trade theories in different categories. One is classical and other is modern theories. Now next is new international economics. Here imperfect competition and technical or technological spillover effect. We know that at present monopolistic competition market is going on because perfect competition is a myth market. Monopoly exists at a very rare stage. Oligopoly, in which only few sellers exist, but monopolistic competition where product is differentiated, large number of buyers and sellers exist in the market, and all are doing business at the objective of non-price competition. They want to sell their more and more products um, in different countries, and they want to engage in their business activities in a larger quantity. So at present, imperfect competition market exists and technological spillover effects we can see. So, intra-sectoral trade, product differentiation, economies of scale we can get by producing large products. If we are producing in a larger quantity, then we can get internal and external economies of scale. And international competitive advantage we can get with the help of this theory of Porter's competitive advantage theory. Next is growth theory. Growth theory mainly endogenous. Growth may be endogenous, may be exogenous. This tells us by Grossman, and new technological theory in which technological gap or product life cycle. Technological gap theory is known as new technological theory, which was introduced by Posner, and product life cycle theory was introduced by Vernon. So, new classical theory of international trade in which resources endowment, this concept of resources endowment was firstly taken by Haxter and Ohlin, and real wages versus real return to capital. It's the theorem of Stokler-Samuelson factor mobility theory or Rybczynski theory. Next is classical theory in which Ricardo or Ricardian theory and Adam Smith theory included. According to Ricardo, there is a comparative cost advantage and international trade held in between the countries by comparative cost advantages. And Adam Smith theory is absolute cost advantage. And protectionism theory is a mercantilism theory in which trade is preferred by some restrictions. If government impose some restrictions on trade, that is called protectionist trade theory. Next is the evolution of trade theories. How these theories evoluted and what are when these theories originated. First of all, mercantilism and new mercantilism theory was evolved in 1500 to 1800. The time period of this theory is 1500 to 1800. The theory of absolute cost advantage theory, which was explained by Adam Smith in 1776. We know that Adam Smith is the father of economics, who tells us about what is economics, and economics is generally related with the wealth or money. So, theory of absolute advantage developed by Adam Smith in which year? 1776. And theory of comparative advantage developed by David Ricardo in 1819. And theory of country size, the theory of factor proportion by Haxter and Ohlin, early 20th century. And country similarity theory, product life cycle theory, which was explained by Raymond Vernon in 1966. And diamond of national advantage, this theory of international trade was explained by or developed by Michael Porter in 1990s. So early 18th century or 19th century, that theory is called classical theory, and in 20th century or 21st century's theory are known as modern theory of international trade. This is the evolution of trade theories. Now, next is theories of international trade. It measures the wealth of nation by the size of its accumulated treasures, like gold and silver. You know that mercantilism theory mainly tells us that each and every country should try to collect more gold and silver by encouraging exports and discouraging imports. So it mainly focuses on international trade rather than internal trade or commerce. Nationalism essential. The main essential thing is for each and every country is to promote nations by gain from trade. And trade imbalances, the object is to export more and import less. Now, next is modern trade theory. This theory of international competitive advantage of industries is also known as diamond theory, the theory that the competitive advantage of certain industries in different nations depends on four aspects that form a diamond. You know that four aspects form diamond. Competitive advantage is created by technological and institutional changes, not just inherited from a country's natural endowment. It means modern trade theory not based on factor endowment theory, not based on comparative cost advantage theory. It is based on competitive advantage theory and technological advancement. If technological upgradation, upliftment occurs in a country, and if countries are more engaging in this competitive world, they are doing more competition with rest of the world, and by doing competition they are improving their technological development. In that case they can get more and more advantages by doing international trade. Modern trade theories are basically product life cycle theory, strategic trade theories, first mover advantage, and strategic trade policies. So, modern trade theories in which product life cycle theory, here economic theory that accounts for changes in the pattern of trade over time, because there are three stages of product. Uh, One is new product, second is maturity level, and third is the main uh, type of product that is used by the person. Next is strategic trade theory. Strategic trade theory suggests that strategic intervention by government in certain industries can enhance their odds for international success. First mover advantage theory tells us that first entrant or first who initially take risk to produce goods, that is called first mover. The first mover or first entrants enjoy and do not share with later or after that other entrants who enter in that business um, later. And next is strategic trade policy. Strategic trade policies in which economic policies that provide companies a strategic cost advantage through government subsidies. So these are modern trade theories. Now next is theories of international trade in which we explain absolute cost advantage theory. It was developed by Adam Smith in 1776. Comparative cost advantage theory, it was developed by Ricardo in which year? 1819. And Hexter Ohlin theory. International trade theory, first is mercantilism theory. Mercantilism, which emerged in England in the mid 16th century, asserted that it is in a country's best interest to maintain a trade surplus, to export more than its imports. This mercantilism trade theory mainly focuses on the reserves of gold and silvers and how we can increase these foreign exchange reserves or gold and silver reserves by encouraging exports and discouraging imports. So, mercantilism advocates that government intervention to achieve a surplus in balance of trade. It viewed trade as a zero sum game, one in which a gain by one country results in a loss by another. Because here is the opportunity cost. If we want to gain something, then we must have to lose something. It means one country can get advantages at the cost of the other country. So here the uh, summation will be equals to 0. If our gain is plus 10 and the other country's loss is minus 10, then what will be the sum of this? 10 plus 10 minus 10 will be equals to 0. So it is known as zero sum game, in which a gain by one country results in a loss by another. As an economic philosophy, mercantilism is problematic and not valid. Yet many political views today have the goal of boosting exports while limiting imports by seeking only selective liberalization of trade. At present, WTO is promoting free trade regions, or WTO is promoting that each and every country should do free trade. And free trade areas are those areas where we can freely trade our products to another countries. Next is theory of trade, in which absolute cost advantage is the most important theory, or it is known as classical theory because it is developed by Adam Smith, who was the father of economics. This absolute advantage theory tells us about that countries should specialize in producing what they are best at things they have an absolute advantage. For example, like bread, peanut butter, or peanut butter, bread, incentive to trade is based on each country having an absolute advantage in a product. In reality, this is unrealistic and quite uncommon to happen this way because this theory tells us that if a country is able to produce only one commodity in larger quantity than other, then countries will do international trade and they will get advantages from this international trade. Absolute advantage theory was developed by Adam Smith, who wrote this book, The Wealth of Nation, in which year 1776. Mercantilism weakens country in the long run and reaches only a few. A country should specialize in production and export that products for which it has an absolute advantage. Import other products has absolute advantage when it is more productive than another country in producing a particular product. Here, if a country is producing more cocoa and other country like Ghana is, if there are two countries who are engaging this international trade, one is Ghana, which is African country, and the second is South Korea. And if Ghana is producing more cocoa and South Korea is producing more rice, if one country is able to produce one commodity in larger and other country is able to produce other commodity in larger, then both will enter in international trade. Ghana will export more cocoa to South Korea, and South Korea will export more rice to Ghana, And in this engaging this international trade business, both will get advantages by doing this international trade. This is known as absolute cost advantage theory of international trade. Now, next is comparative cost advantage theory. Comparative cost advantage theory was developed by David Ricardo in 1817. David Ricardo took Adam Smith theory one step further by exploring what might happen when one country has an absolute advantage in the production of all goods. According to Ricardo's theory of comparative cost advantage, it makes sense of a country to specialize in the production of those goods that it produces more efficiently and to buy the goods that it produces less efficiently from other countries. Even if this means that buying goods from other countries that it could produce more efficiently itself. If one country is able to produce both the commodities in larger quantity and other country is able to produce both the commodities in lesser quantity, in that case, according to David Ricardo, both countries will enter in international trade and both will do this exports and imports, and they will get advantages through this international trade. So David Ricardo assumed that if a country is able to produce both the products in an efficient manner, in that case, they will also enter in the international trade and they both will get advantages from this international trade. Definition of this comparative advantages refers to the ability of a country to produce both commodities or particular products or particular goods and services at lower opportunity cost as compared to the other in the field. Here are some assumptions and criticisms of comparative cost advantages which was developed by Ricardo. uh, Explained here that what are the assumptions of this comparative cost advantage theory. First assumption is that this theory mainly consider only labor cost. This theory only consider labor cost. We know that factors of productions are four: land, labor, capital, entrepreneur. And only one factor can't produce any type of goods and services because the combination of all the factors and the use of jointly, if we jointly use all the factors of production, then we can produce goods. Only one factor can't give contribution. So this theory only takes that labor cost is the main cost, and to see this cost, we can engage in this international trade businesses. But this is unrealistic. Next is this theory assume that all labor to be homogeneous. It means all the labor which are engaged in production of goods and services that are homogeneous. How the labor can be homogeneous or equal. Next is similar taste for all. This is also not possible, but this is assumed by David Ricardo by explaining this theory, comparative cost advantage. Next is fixed proportion of labor is used in the production of all commodities. This theory takes that fixed proportion of labor only taken for the production of goods and services. There is a fixed ratio, and we know that at present, as well as the size of a business firm increases, the ratio which are in which we are using labor and capital, the proportion can be changed. It may not be always remains constant or fixed. And next assumption is full employment, which is a very rare situation. Full employment does not exist in a developed or in a developing country. So these are the assumptions of comparative cost advantage theory, which was explained by David Ricardo. But here, some criticism of this theory is that this theory neglects all non-labor cost. involved in the production. We know that all factors of production, uh, instead of labor, other factors also give great contribution in the production of goods and services. How we can ignore it? So, Ricardian theory neglects all non-labor cost involved in the production. That's why this theory was criticized by other economists. Next is labor is not homogeneous, labor is heterogeneous due to different grades and kinds. Next is the taste and preferences of the consumer will not remain always same. The taste differs with the growth of economies and income brackets. Next is utilization of the proportion of labor depends on the commodities, type of commodity being produced. A fixed proportion of labor can't be used for the production of all goods. Next is full employment. Full employment in every economy has an existence of underemployment because full employment is a very rare situation and it cannot be achieved very easily. So, all the assumptions which are assumed by Ricardo to explain this comparative cost advantage theory of international trade, all these assumptions are based on some unrealistic and they are not exist in real world. So these assumptions were criticized by other economists, and after that new and modern theory of international trade originated. Base of international trade theories. Why countries do international trade? The reason for trade is that resources are available in each and every country differently. There is a difference in resources availability or resources productivity. According to classical theory, comparative cost advantage theory assumed that there is a perfect competition exists in the market where very large number of buyers and sellers exist and all produces homogeneous product and same product. And third assumption is constant or diminishing returns to scale. Classical theory assumed that there is a constant return applicable. Law of constant return tells us that if we are using 10% input and we are getting 10% output, it means the ratio of input and output is same. That is called constant return. But the new trade theory is based on economies of scale as well as the size of the firm increases. If we are engaging in a large scale production, then we will get some internal and external economies of scale by enhancing our business size. Next is imperfect competition exists in real world. Monopolistic competition or oligopolistic market structure exists at present, not perfect competition. And next is increasing returns to scale law is applicable. Each and every business enterprise's main goal is to maximize its profit and firm will produce more by using technical advancement and more capital. Uh, so increasing return to scale will be applicable in which we will use less uh, cost and produce more. So, new trade theory is more relevant and more realistic at present. Next is Hexter-Ohlin theory of international trade. Hexter-Ohlin theory is also known as factor endowment theory. It is based on comparative cost advantage theory, but this comparative cost advantage theory mainly explain that the international trade took place due to the cost differences. But Hexter-Ohlin theory explain the factors endowment availability because cost depends upon the availability of factors. If factors are rare, then cost will be higher. If factors are abundant, then cost will be lower. So how we can determine the cost? Cost depends upon the availability of the factors of production in our country. So Hexter Olim mainly focuses on factor endowment or availability of the factors, which is the main base of doing international trade. However, they did not explain classical theory does not did not explain the reason for cost differences. But this theory explained the reason for cost differences. Modern theory start where cost comparative theory ends. Modern theory of international trade, in which Hector-Olin theory, Paul Samuelson theory, Paul Krugman theory, and Michael Porter model theory, and the Elie Hector and Bertil Ohlin model, also included in modern theories of international trade. So, Hector-Olin theory mainly explain that trade, uh, why countries do trade goods of goods and services with each other. The main emphasis being on the difference of resources between two countries. This model explained that the comparative advantage is actually influenced by the interaction between the resources countries have and production technologies by which the different production factors are being utilized during the production cycle. This model starts from the assumption that country A produces two products like food and textile. These two kinds of product need two different factors like labor and capital, which are available in limited quantity in each and every country. In the same time, food production requires more land, so it can be said in territory intensive and textile require more labor, being in this way labor intensive. So food is based on mainly depends upon land cost, and the production of textile depends upon the labor. So, beginning with these presumptions, the Hector-Olin model explained the implications trade between two countries, A and B, has if the countries produce the same product, food and textile, then what will be the cost of there will be what type of differences in their cost, and how they can produce more goods by reducing the factors cost and gaining the more benefit from the international trade. So this theory mainly based on factor endowment. And specific factor and income distribution theory was explained by Paul Samuelson or Ronald Jones model. The standard model of trade explained by Paul Krugman, and the comparative competitive advantage theory was explained by Michael Porter, and factor endowment theory was mainly explained by Hector and Ohlin. Here in this table, here products are two, X and Y. Cost is labor and territory means land. If X is a commodity, we are using 20 labor but 95 because food. If we want to produce food, then we must need more land rather than labor. And here for the production of textile, more labor 10, and land is less 5. What is the total of this? 30 and 100. And if labor is divided by land, so 20 divided by 95, and 10 divided by 5, and 30 divided by 100. This ratio we will get. This is the relative abundance and trade specialization in the product for which there is a factor intensity. And T by L means land divided by labor. 95 divided by 20, 5 divided by 10, and 100 divided by 30. We can get this ratio. So by using this ratio, Hector Olin proved that difference in cost, which is based on factor endowment, that is the main basis for doing international trade. This is also explained with the help of this diagram. Here, two nations' production possibility curves are given. This PPC curve is for nation A, and this production possibility curve is for nation 2. Or this is the indifference curve, where indifference curve is tangent to these curves or PPC curve, like nation 2. This indifference curve is touches to nation 2's at A dash point and nation 1 at A point. So these are two equilibrium points where both nations can get advantages by doing international trade. And this I2 curve, which is beyond that PPC curve of two nations, that will not show the equilibrium. So this only this A dash point and A point is showing more efficient level of production by producing both the nations and getting more advantages from this international trade. Next is the new trade theory. This new trade theory emerged in the 1970s by a number of economists. Countries do not necessarily specialize and trade solely to take advantage of their differences in resources, endowment, or technology. They also trade because increasing return law is applicable that makes specialization advantageous in some industries. New trade theorists introduce industrial relations or industrial organizations, view into trade theories and include real life imperfect competition which really exists at present. And they argue that because of economies of scale, like internal and external, by producing products in a larger quantity, there are increasing returns to specialization in many industries. Next is the International Product Life Cycle Theory, in which three stages are available. One is introduction and growth of stages. One is new product or new product when new product is launched. Second stage is majority stage, and third is later stage or after that uh, when the end of that product happens. So multinational companies or corporations manufacture product in developed countries, exports to developing countries. Early majority stages when multinational corporations moves production to developing countries begins importing to home country. Third is late maturity when developing country competitors exports product to MNCs, home country competes with MNCs imports. And decline stages when developing country market remains viable, target markets for MNCs, MNCs home country market is diminishing. So in the beginning, this curve is increasing. After that, it become maximum, and at last it start decline. So this is called product life cycle theory of international trade. New trade theory summary. By trade, each nations may able to specialize in producing a narrower range of products than in autarky. Yet they can increase the variety of goods for consumption at lower cost. Thus, trade offer mutual gains when countries do not differ in their resource endowment or technology. So new trade mainly focuses on specializing that product in which we can produce more by decreasing the cost of production. And limitations of early trade theories are that do not take into account the cost of international transportation. Classical theory ignore transportation cost, which is very important, and we can't ignore the transportation cost. Tariffs and imports restrictions can distort trade flows. Scale economies can bring about additional efficiencies, and when government selectively targets certain industries for strategic investment, this may cause trade patterns contrary to theoretical explanation. Today, countries can access needed low cost capital on global markets. Some services do not lend themselves to cross border trade. These are the limitations of classical trade theories, which was explained uh, by the origin of before the origin of modern theories. Now, summary of theories are zero sum means absolute advantage theory is specialized on only one product, and comparative cost advantage theory tells us that if one country is able to produce both the commodities in larger quantity, then international trade will happen and it will give us advantages. Product life cycle theories develop the stages, and new trade theories explain the economies of scale and first mover advantages. And these theories are explained by Adam Smith, David Ricardo, Hector Olin, Raymond Berman, Paul Krugman, etc. Now we can conclude from this theory of international trade that trade enhances the welfare of both countries, but the distribution of these gains among participants within each country and among the countries is not uniform. Thank you.